Hello again, everyone. Born on February 4th, 1958, in St. Boniface, a part of Winnipeg, Manitoba, Mike Hall is a musician. He went west to Kamloops, British Columbia, with his family when he was a little boy because his father got a job with the Canadian Pacific Railway. It changed everything for Mike when he made that move. Living in the middle of British Columbia gave him a lot of freedom to move around and discover the back roads and open fields. It wasn't long before one thing took over his whole life. Automobiles. Not brand new ones, but old, rusty wrecks that people have left in fields and behind barns to rot. By the early 1970s, Mike was already a teenager and going into people's backyards and driving along old country roads in search of dead cars that he could bring back to life. Most kids were saving money to buy music or bikes, but Mike brought home old things that no one else wanted. Erosion was not visible. He saw promise. He didn't think it was trash if it was a beat-up pickup or a 1950s car. Like a puzzle, it was there to be solved. Some of his buddies believed it was strange. He didn't care that people in the neighborhood looked at him funny. He was already gathering cars and putting them away wherever he could. When other kids were trying to decide what they wanted to be when they grew up, Mike already knew. He wanted to fix wheels. Mike had a lot of old cars by the time he was in his 20s in the late 1970s. He had not attended trade school. He didn't have any fancy awards on his wall. He had skills from the real world. Everything was taught to him by himself. There are many ways to fix cars, like rebuilding engines and shaping metal. He learned a lesson from every wreck he brought home. Trying to start every engine that wouldn't go was a task. Over time, all that mistakes turned into skill. How to do something that you didn't learn in school. He got it from cracking his fingers and spending long nights in cold sheds. As a child, Mike Hall didn't think he'd one day own hundreds of old cars, but his interest in rust and engines didn't just appear out of thin air. He was already climbing rocks and blowing up mountainsides to make money in the 1980s, long before the cameras came along. It was the start of his real career. He set up Chimera Springs Rockworks as a business, and it wasn't your normal building job. Mike was not putting bricks or pouring concrete. He hung from ropes, drilled into the sides of cliffs, and set off controlled blasts. Most people would not dare to do this hard, dangerous work. But Mike loved the thrill of it. During those years, people began calling him the Rasta Blasta because of his crazy day job and long, dreadlocked hair. He was known by that name for the rest of his life. Throughout the 1980s, 1990s, and even into the 2000s, he stayed in that business. He made a lot of money blasting, and people in British Columbia knew him for it. It wasn't saved, though. Almost all of it was going to junk cars, in addition to a few here and there. He was hungry for old cars that no one needed. What mattered was that they were rusty and missing half of their parts. It was important to Mike that the car had a life or a story, and the fact that it needed to be saved made him want it even more. He wasn't buying brand new, sparkling classics. His goal was to find the rust buckets that were left behind. His land started to fill up with cars from all over the world over the next few decades. They included some very rare power cars from the 1960s. Some were old European sports cars or beat-up pickup trucks that hadn't been driven in years. He would buy another broken-down machine with the money he got from jobs where he had to blast rock. In the 2010s, people began to inquire about the number of cars he truly owned. It was crazy how many there were. Not just a collection, but over 400 cars were sitting on his land. The ground was made up of rust and metal for as far as the eye could see. Laughably, he said he didn't gather cars. He got rust on him. Now you know where the name Rust Brothers came from. It wasn't just engineers and laborers who worked with him. They were both working on the same confusing task. Mike wasn't planning to sell cars or open a store to make money. Other people had left machines that he was trying to save. Keeping them from going to the junkyard felt like a win, even if they were never fixed up. People from the outside didn't always get it, but the way Mike talked about his cars made it clear that it wasn't just an interest. It went deeper than that. Once, he said, he couldn't leave a car that needed saving. It made him feel good, and each blast he set off during the day was one more step toward being able to buy another piece of history at night. In reality, Mike Hall never really tried to become famous. He was living a very different kind of life in the Shuswap area of British Columbia long before he ever went on TV. He moved to a farm in the middle of nowhere, away from all the noise and chaos. The people never knew what his wife's name was, even though he got married. Their son, Connor Charman Hall, was born in the 1980s. They raised a family together. Minnie, Mike's little dog, quickly became part of the family. Although the farm was quiet, Mike was anything but. Even though he had a wife and child, he was still crazy about cars. Actually, it made things a little stressful at home. They couldn't have any more junk cars on their property, according to his wife. The farm they owned was 26 acres, and she didn't want it to become another rusty graveyard. However, Mike did not fight. He just went to a different place to follow his dream. A 5-acre lot was bought separately in the town of Tappan, which is close to Shoe Swap Lake. Along the Trans-Canada Highway, it became famous. In time, people came to call that spot Mike's Field of Dreams. As far as the eye could see, it was just a dry, sandy area full of hundreds of old, rusty cars. There were objects from the 1940s and 1970s. Others were buried in grass or had their clothes taken off completely. But Mike saw that each and every one of them still had life in it. Erosion was not visible. He saw promise. Since the early 2000s, Mike's life has been all over the place. He did his main job, which was to blast rocks as part of a highway building crew during the day. But he changed at night. He would work alone in his dump like a crazy scientist, trying to give old metal some new life. It didn't matter to him if nobody was there. Not to get famous. He enjoyed doing it. Sadly, fate had other ideas. In 2016, something strange took place. Back in British Columbia's mountains, Mike was working when a big rock slide stopped a highway. To get help quickly, the cleanup crew called Mike Hall. What he brought with him and his experience made something crazy happen. Mike was chosen to be in one of the parts of the Highway Through Hell documentary that was being made by the Discovery Channel. It was the first time everyone saw him in real life. Mike climbed up a pile of rocks wearing a hard hat like it was nothing. He then set his charges. He wore his well-known Rasta Blasta, used dynamite to break up the rocks and clear the road. Even though they were only in the movie for a short time, it was enough. People were drawn to him because he was brave, had crazy hair, and was full of energy. If you didn't see it for yourself, Mike Hall's quiet part of Tappan, British Columbia, had become something most people wouldn't believe until they saw it for themselves. There were more than 500 derelict cars spread out over acres of land. Some were getting sunk into the ground. Some of them had weeds growing on them. Unfortunately, Mike didn't see any trash. He witnessed history. He saw promise. He was familiar with all cars. Someone wrote that he could tell you the exact make, model, and year of any of the 562 cars that were strewn around his land just by looking at them. It was a real guess. He knew where each one came from and what it meant to him. There were people who had been with him for over 30 years. It had been almost 40 minutes for some of them. They were more than cars. His life depended on them. It was getting too much, though. He had been quietly feeling that the dream that used to make him happy was becoming a drag. Keeping over 500 old, broken-down cars wasn't just a matter of room anymore. It was expensive. It took some time. It had to have power. And people noticed. Occasionally the wrong kind. Neighbors became interested. People in charge began to ask questions. Mike was no longer able to ignore the signs. He was moving less quickly. In 2020, he said that getting older was getting to him. He was honest and said that he wouldn't be able to fix up all of his cars in the time he had left. People who didn't plan ahead got hurt, which he saw. Mike was getting close to the same age as his father, who had died at the age of 60. It started to bother him. Others in the collecting business had died or gotten sick, leaving their families in a mess. He kept thinking about the same question. Just imagine what would happen to his 500 cars if he disappeared. He told someone out loud once, not to cause trouble, but because it was true. What are the 400 cars in the field going to be used for by my wife and kids? A sad thought wasn't all it was. He would keep that warning in mind in every choice he made after that. Mike Hall thought he might finally be ready to slow down when he looked around his land in Tappan, British Columbia, in 2016. He had been gathering old cars, chasing rust, and storing old wrecks for decades. And now he had more than 300 of them spread out over 5 acres. That was way too much. He wanted to leave. Completely, not just a little. So he made a brave choice. He offered everything for sale in a big box. Things like the land, the cars, the junk, the mess, and the crazy people. The price being asked was $1.19 million. Most people thought that was crazy. An entire field full of junkers? Who would want that? The ad didn't get any real responses. No one had a different opinion. There wasn't a bunch of cars there. The place was a junkyard. In 2017, Mike didn't give up or drop the price. Instead, he did something very different. He got more expensive. $1.45 million was his request. Even he was shocked by what happened next. The story went crazy. An individual offering 5 acres and more than 300 old cars for sale. A lot of people talked about it. News sites wrote about it, and pictures of his property covered in his car went viral across Canada. All of a sudden, Mike wasn't just a neighborhood character. A lot of people were interested in him. Some news sites said that there might be even more than 500 cars. The land had become a myth. People who liked cars started calling from all over the country with offers to buy single cars. It was a bigger surprise when the TV guys called, though. Tyrone Hepburn, a Canadian director who worked on Highway Through Hell, was one of them. He remembered Mike from before in the wildland. The internet was talking about this strange man who owned hundreds of broken-down cars and wanted to leave it all behind. The idea of a TV show didn't seem so far-fetched anymore. Mike's life was different from everyone else's. It seemed like a story. Ideas were pitched by producers. Some people wanted an interesting story about trash and chaos. But Mike was clear about one thing. It had to be about something important for him to be on TV. He said the show couldn't just be funny about his mess. It had to be about him reaching his goal. His real goal was to work with a small group to fix up old cars and maybe make the crazy into something beautiful. Mike Hall didn't slow down or sleep it off when he turned 60. His Rusty Kingdom's gates were wide open, letting everyone in. He agreed to film a show that would finally make him use the hundreds of cars he had been gathering for decades, with the help of Mayhem Entertainment and Core Studios. On his land in Tappan, British Columbia, he built a legitimate workplace. He called it Rust Brower's Restorations because it was surrounded by piles of old, rusted cars. The idea behind the show was easy to understand. Get the cars he loved fixed up, polished, and put on the market. Others who knew Mike knew this wasn't just a business plan, though. He had to fight against time, against the car's deterioration, and against his strong emotional ties to them. In 2018, they began filming the show Rust Valley Restorers. From the start, Mike brought in his best friend Avery Schuff, a mechanic for heavy machinery who has a beard, big strength, and even bigger ideas. He had the nickname Muscle Car MacGyver. Mike also brought his son, Connor Charman Hall. Connor is a calm, sensible young man who always seemed to be fixing the money problems his dad made. Sarah Ward took care of parts, and Cassidy McCone joined as a body tech. They were a strange group of car lovers who all had one thing in common. They loved cars. They thought that cars that everyone else had given up on could still be saved. It didn't feel or look like most big-budget car shows. There weren't any fancy images or big surprises here. People in a small town were shown as they tried to achieve their goals. On December 6, 2018, Rust Valley Restorers made its debut. They showed it on the History Channel in Canada, and people adored it. Mike's crazy energy, big heart, and unwavering positivity wowed viewers to tears. He appeared and behaved like a businessman. A 6-foot-plus hippie who spoke his mind and spent money like it was candy. There was one show where he said, "This shop almost killed me." He then said that he had put almost $2 million into the business. That was an attempt to soften the blow by calling it an investment in his metallic dreams, but it was clear he wasn't really in it for the money. They were meant to be making money, but Mike always spent too much on the cars and didn't want to sell them. Connor kept telling him this. When he sold a car, he often lowered the price because he liked the person who bought it. He said that he would lose money to make other people's dreams come true. There was a lot of that. Some lucky people got their dream car at a great price, and they will never forget it. It was bad for Rust Bros' bottom line. The numbers didn't matter to the watchers, though. That which they saw was heart. It was seen by Netflix. They picked up the show to stream around the world in 2019. All of a sudden, Rust Valley was well known. People came to Tappan from all over the world just to see the famous junkyard and maybe meet the Rust Brothers team. As he gave tours, Mike often smiled like a child in a candy store. The way Mike interacted with his son was one of the best parts of the show. It was clear that Connor loved his dad a lot. He often had to play the adult, though. Mike followed his feelings. Connor did what made sense. And the way they pushed and pulled together made magic. They fought about funds and deadlines, but they had a strong bond. What the show was about went beyond cars in many ways. A dream was passed down from one family to the next through love and loyalty. There was a different kind of energy with Avery Schuff. Avery tried to teach Mike how to handle his money better many times. He was loud, funny, and full of good advice. Some time ago, Avery even quit Rust Brothers to open his own business called Wild Man Restorations. People were shocked by that move, but there was no bad blood. Avery kept showing up on the show and helping Mike. In 2021, he and Big Donnie Kleinfelder started a spin-off show called Backroad Truckers. The world in Rust Valley kept getting bigger. Fans saw all the good and bad seasons from 2018 to 2021. Mike saved cars that were about to get lost forever. They saw budgets go through the roof, schedules fall apart, and dreams almost come true. Mike gave a client a price of $15,000 to fix up a 1966 Lincoln Continental, but it turned out to be much more than that. But he didn't quit. He stayed at the job and took the loss. He wasn't going to abandon anyone. Mike Hall was that person. Mike Hall was having a hard time behind the scenes by the time Season 3 came out in 2020. We spent a lot of money to run Rust Brothers. No big business money was used to pay for it. Mike used his own money to pay for most of it, paying workers, getting parts, and running the shop without consistently making money. He even said that he didn't have a business plan and that his friends often made fun of how bad he was with money for fun. That was funny before, but not anymore. He started to feel the weight of all the bills by the end of 2020. He started to really think about retiring again. He had put it off because he wanted to keep the shop open for the show. There was more than just money at stake. It was getting old for Mike, and he was worried about his health. Not completely kidding. He once said that he could die tomorrow from climbing hills and breathing in paint fumes for years. He wondered what would happen to the cars if that did happen. Fans didn't see that coming, but then it did. It was discovered in early 2021 that the land where the Rust Bros yard was located was actually marked for farming. It was undeveloped farmland in British Columbia, so Mike wasn't allowed to run a full-fledged car repair business there. Authorities in the area had ignored the problem for many years. But in January 2021, when Mike started building a new workshop, the Columbia Shoe Swap Regional District told him he wasn't allowed to do that. He had to get a special exemption from the Agricultural Land Commission in order to keep doing business properly. The town board gave him permission and said that the Rust Brothers shop was good for the economy and tourism. However, in May 2023, the commission formally said it wasn't true. For all intents and purposes, Rust Brothers was no longer allowed. Mike no longer owned the land at that point. There was now a new owner, and Mike was only a renter. All of them worked together to find a solution. One idea was to split up the land so that the shop could be on its own smaller piece, which would make changing the zone easy. In early 2025, the plan was accepted by local officials because they liked it. However, the stress of the whole situation had already taken a toll. Then fires broke out. It was very hot in British Columbia in the summer of 2021. Plus, Mike's yard was full of old cars, ready to be set on fire. Whatever he had could be destroyed by even a small grass fire. Because of his fear, the stress of the law, and money problems, Mike had to make a tough choice. He was packing up to sell. Around the middle of 2021, Mike sold the Tappan property in secret. The cars, however, were not part of the deal. Consequently, he had to shift them. He set up a huge sale with no minimum bids. October 2nd, 2021, was chosen as the date. It was planned to sell more than 500 cars in one day, many of which hadn't been driven in decades. It didn't feel real. Mike said, "In one day, 40 years of my life will be gone." A few of the cars were sold for around $300. Some went for more than $10,000. Mike didn't think about the money, though. Everyone he gave the cars to was good. He even told people who bought the cars to send him pictures when they fixed them up. Only 50 of the cars were left when the sale was over. Around 30 of Mike's favorite cars, mostly muscle cars and a Dodge Roadster, he kept. There were others in Canada and the US. Mike was hurt very badly that day. He stated that the whole thing was confusing. It hurt him to see cars he had owned for 30 or 40 years being taken away on trailers. However, there was also comfort. Lastly, the yard was clean. The trouble with the zones was no longer as bad. His family was quietly pleased that the huge overhead was gone, especially his son Connor. The sale took place when Mike was 65 years old. He stated that it was the correct thing to do. Following the auction, Rust Valley Restorers showed the whole thing as the last episode of Season 4 in the spring of 2022. It was thought to be the end by fans. Mike had given up on his hope. The show looked like it was over. Something strange did happen behind the scenes, though. Mike didn't leave, but instead was pulled back in. People started to offer him more cars after the sale. He made a joke about how his collection started to grow again after he cleared the field. He did not even try. His collection of cars grew to almost 200 by 2023. He told me that they just found me. One call would be about an old Buick, and then another would be about a Pontiac, and all of a sudden the cars were back. They weren't done with the show yet, even though season 4 looked like the end. In interviews, Mike gave hints that they had shot new episodes. He said they had 8 shows ready to go. He, Avery, and his son are in it. Throughout 2022, these were filmed, and test runs in the winter were done in cars that weren't meant to be on snow. It got great reviews. Season 5 finally started in the fall of 2024, showing how the team was getting used to life after the big sale. Their shop was smaller and there were fewer cars, but they had the same attitude. 2 very important cars to Mike were a 1968 Shelby GT 350 Mustang and a 1941 Diamond T truck. In one story, they almost lost access to a key lot they were using, which was a scary event. One more nod to the ongoing land problems. Mike kept going, though. On video, he told his friends that fixing up old cars was in his blood, and he wasn't going to give up. Outside of the show, Mike started working as a brand spokesperson for eBay Motors Canada. He helped people with their cars online and showed them how he looked for parts. People who spoke to him on Zoom said he was still enthusiastic and full of life. He felt free after letting go of the huge collection. He could now look forward to working again. There is still a Rust Brothers Restorations, but it is smaller and smarter now. Mike works on a few jobs at a time and makes sure they are done right. His other activities include going to car shows and charity events in British Columbia. He helps young workers by telling them what he learned the hard way. People have been moved by his story to take chances, follow their dreams, and maybe not worry so much about making money. Right now, Mike is in his late 60s. He and his wife and dog are still living in the shoe swap. His relationship with Connor seems stronger than ever. You can guess that Mike's wife is happy that the garden isn't full of rusty cars anymore, but she doesn't like being the center of attention. In the world of cars, Mike has also become like a grandfather. Many people look up to him because he created something because he loved it, not to make money. It's no longer just a TV show, Rust Valley. It is a gift. Mike will always be the same guy who can't say no to a rusty fender and a good story, even if he never gets 500 cars again.